Hey there, welcome. Today we're going to be linguistic detectives. Seriously, we're going to dive deep and crack the code of a single ancient Semitic root to uncover this hidden story about how ideas are even born. It's a wild journey from a physical weapon to a totally abstract concept, and it's all buried inside just one word. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with a puzzle, then we'll hunt for clues in its most ancient origins. From there, we'll trace how it changed over time, and finally, we'll piece it all together to see what words can really teach us about how we think. Okay, so let's get right to the central mystery. In languages like Arabic and Hebrew, you've got this root as. Now, that first sound is a deep, throaty sound that's pretty unique to Semitic languages. And this root gives us words like Azeez. It's a common name that means powerful, mighty, sometimes even dear. But here's the thing. That exact same root also means nobility or dignity. So, power and dignity, they feel kind of related, sure, but how did they grow from the exact same seed? And that's the question right at the heart of all this. What could these three things, power, nobility, and a fortress wall, possibly have in common? What's the one single idea that links them all together? Well, we're about to find out. To solve this, you have to understand a really core principle of Semitic linguistics, and that is abstract ideas like power or love or justice almost always start with something physical, something you can touch and see. You see, you couldn't just invent a word for power out of thin air. It had to come from a real-world action or object that everybody understood. So our first real piece of evidence actually comes from this sound itself, the Z sound. This symbol you see here is the Hebrew and Aramaic letter for that sound, Zion. And in this ancient system, a letter isn't just a sound. Nope, it's also a picture with a name. And boom, there's our breakthrough. The name of the letter itself, Zion, literally means sword or weapon. Now this is huge. It tells us that the very sound Z carried this ancient idea of cutting, of fighting, of creating separation. So the root's origin isn't just some vague strength. It's the specific physical act of using a weapon to cut or to divide. Okay, so our starting point is the very concrete act of cutting something with a sword. Now let's trace how this one single action blossoms into the complex ideas we have today. How do you get from a weapon to a concept like power? Well, it happens in these really logical steps. First, you've got the action itself, separating, cutting, making a boundary. Just picture someone digging a trench or cutting a line in the sand. Then that action produces a result, right? You get a defensive wall, a fortress, something that separates and protects. And then finally, the meaning makes this incredible leap from the physical fortress to the quality of that fortress, its unbreachable nature, its inviolability. And that is what becomes our abstract idea of power. Now, that sounds like a really neat theory, but how can we actually be sure it's true? In linguistics, you need proof. So if our hypothesis is right, that the core idea here is separation, then we should be able to find that same idea locked away inside other, related words built from the same base. You see, in Semitic languages, a lot of words are built on this kind of 2 or 3 consonant skeleton. Our core root, our etymon, is just those 2 consonants, ein and sein, or as. When you add a third consonant, you create a whole new word, but it should still carry the DNA of the original. And the evidence is just fascinating. Check this out. When you add an R to our core root, you get the verb for to prevent or to push someone back. Add an F and it means to turn away from something. Add an L and it literally means to separate or isolate. Each new word is like a different flavor of that core concept of separation. It's like a linguistic DNA test, and it's a perfect match. Okay, so we've got our proof in hand. Let's go all the way back to our original riddle. We've pretty much established that the core idea is about separation, about creating an unbreachable barrier. So how does that finally connect power and dignity? And here it is, the solution. The shared concept, the one idea that ties it all together, is inviolability. You see, power is physical inviolability. It's being like a fortress that just cannot be breached. And dignity? Well, that's social and moral inviolability. It's being someone who is irreproachable, who has this kind of protective barrier of honor around them. They're just 2 sides of the same coin. And what's absolutely incredible is that the Quran itself practically defines the word for us. When it describes itself as a book that is Azeez, it doesn't just say powerful. It explains exactly what that means. Falsehood cannot come to it from before or from behind. In other words, it's unassailable from any direction, a perfect description of an impenetrable defense. And we see the exact same logic at play in the Torah. Jacob describes his son Reuben as first in dignity and power, using our root word Oz. But then he says Reuben lost that nobility. And why? Because he violated his father's bed. He crossed a sacred boundary, breaching the family's honor. His dignity was a protective barrier, and he broke it. You know, this ancient concept is still so deeply human. This idea of a protective social barrier is really at the heart of concepts like chaya, or what we might call modesty. It's a kind of voluntary self-separation, a creation of personal boundaries that serves to protect one's own dignity and inviolability. So the crucial point here is that by just digging into this one single root, we've unearthed an entire worldview about protection and power and honor. We've seen how language isn't just a random collection of labels. It's a living history of how human beings have made sense of their world. So what have we learned today? Well, for one, language has a structure, a deep logic that's actually rooted in physical reality. We saw how letters themselves can carry meaning, and how abstract thoughts about things like power and dignity grew from the very concrete act of building a wall. And finally, how from one simple two-consonant root, a whole universe of connected ideas can just blossom. And that's really the amazing thing, isn't it? Every single word we use is like a fossil. It contains the preserved remains of ancient actions and ideas and struggles. It's a reminder that just beneath the surface of the words we use every single day, there are incredible stories just waiting to be discovered. You just have to know where to dig.